Hello, and welcome to Direct Approach with Wayne Moorehead, an exclusive podcast by Direct Selling News, where Wayne interviews the channel's leading corporate executives to provide timely insights and relevant takeaways to help grow and evolve your businesses. In today's episode, Wayne is joined by Lynne Coté, President and CEO of Princess House. In 1963, Princess House became one of just a handful of companies using the direct selling model. The company's unique, hand-blown crystalware and collectibles quickly gained popularity, as did the opportunity for women to earn equal pay. Almost 60 years later, Princess House has moved away from collectibles and into the kitchen. Its product line of cutlery, cookware, kitchen tools, storage options, and electrics has allowed it to stay relevant and popular in changing times. Today, the U.S.-focused company is on a mission to make life healthier and more beautiful, and in 2021, it ranked 48th on the DSN Global 100 list with $195 million in revenue. But what is most remarkable about the Princess House story is its dramatic turnaround during the pandemic. Lynne Coté first joined Princess House as a consultant in late 2019 after the company weathered 3 consecutive years of declining sales. Her more than 30 years of experience in connecting brands and customers led her to being named President and CEO in January 2020. And despite the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic, she led Princess House to record-breaking growth. Today on Direct Approach, Lynne and Wayne discuss how she created a strategy to turn the company's sales around, how she was forced to change that strategy as lockdowns began, and how she leveraged the opportunity to create greater connection between the Princess House brand and its customers. Lynne also talks about the importance of meaningful relationships in direct selling and how departmental journey visions help create a blueprint for the future. We are so excited to announce that Lynne is also a speaker at the upcoming DSU hybrid event in April. For the first time in 3 years, we will be back in person for the 13th annual DSN Global Celebration and Awards and DSU educational events, all taking place April 19th through the 21st at the Omni Frisco Hotel in Frisco, Texas. This incredible interview is just a warm-up. At DSU, Lynne will share more stories, learnings, and insights along with 35 plus industry executives that as a direct selling executive yourself looking to grow and evolve your business, you can't afford to miss these conversations. And of course, if attending in person, you'll enjoy networking, connection, and momentum that you can only get at an in-person event. Registration is free for all active corporate direct selling executives. To claim your complimentary ticket to DSU, register today at dsu2022.com. Before we start the interview, we want to thank this episode's sponsor, Exigo. In an industry that demands adaptability, Exigo delivers unrivaled access to the data that drives your business. From CRM to transactions to commissions. Flexible, scalable, and powerful, with Exigo, the possibilities are unlimited. Learn more at exigo.com. That is EXIGO.com. And now, please help me welcome your host, Wayne Moorehead, and today's guest, Lynne Coté, President and CEO of Princess House.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Moorehead, and I'm very honored and excited today to be joined by the President, CEO, and Chairperson of Princess House, Lynne Coté. Lynne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate you taking the time. Been looking forward to this conversation. The impact and the results that you've had in your time at Princess House is nothing short of amazing, and I'm really excited to dig into that. But before we jump into your time at Princess House, I'd love to hear a little bit about the journey that led you into the direct selling channel.
Sure. My background was in women's apparel, and for most of my career, I spent working directly with brick and mortar traditional retailers. And when 2008 happened and the recession happened, I really saw that whole world start to crumble. The attention to the brand, the attention to merchandising the product, and even from what you conceptually designed for the product was not what was happening on the retail floor. And so when I first learned about direct selling from being introduced to a brand called Cabby, which is still a women's fashion brand, I was really intrigued because it really was the antithesis of what was happening in traditional retailers. You could present your brand the way you wanted it to be presented. What came out of the design room was actually what entered on the collection. And there was really a price integrity to it because this idea of personal styling, there's a value to that. And I felt like that was really what women's apparel really needed. And so I joined in 2013 as CEO of Cabby.
I love that you went back to a little bit about the brand and kind of the impact that you could have in the retail channel, as a brand, as a company, that there were limits to your ability to kind of extend that brand experience all the way through the channel, all the way downstream to the customer experience. I think that's fascinating because I think historically we looked at our ability as somewhat limited as well to impact the consumer, but that has changed significantly over the last couple of years. So I think that's fascinating. And again, I know that that Jones Apparel Group is an enormous company. You've had a really incredible and distinguished career, and I think the time that you spent there obviously really informed and helped as you transitioned into this channel. So jumping into Princess House, it's an incredible company. It's about to reach a really incredible milestone of being in business for 60 years, which is amazing. And I was about to say insane, especially as you look at, the average lifespan of companies now is down to about 10 years for a large company before it's either purchased or liquidated. And as I mentioned, the results that you've had in, the 2+ years that you've been at Princess House are truly amazing. However, you joined the company at a really interesting time. The previous 3 years had been in decline. The company had spent the last 3 years in revenue decline. So obviously going into this, you went in eyes wide open. You knew that this was going to be a challenge from the get-go, but what did you see, as you looked into Princess House that really got you excited and inspired you to join?
Yes, I joined as a consultant for a short period of time prior to actually taking this position. And what I saw was a leadership team that was very, very rich in their history with the company and in their talents. But with any company that's been around for a long period of times, you typically go through that S curve of growth. And they were in that trough where they were really looking for that next platform of growth, but there just wasn't alignment and really a process in place for everybody within the organization and the field to get aligned on what was that next stage for Princess House. And I knew that because of some of the things I've done with previous companies, that I could not only get the organization aligned on a strategy, but then reorganize the organization to support the strategy and then create a partnership with the field that at the time was really missing.
It's really interesting. So obviously those first few months, those first 90 days, we always talk about the importance of those 90 days. Yeah. So did you know, as you walked in, because you had that time as a consultant, did you know some of the things that you had to do in those first 90 days to really set like the tone for the rest of your tenure there?
I did. I think getting the opportunity to do a deep dive with the work that previous consultants had done, there was a lot of data there that really was pointing in the direction of some things that needed to be fixed. So my first priority was really stabilizing the business that we had, because there was such a disconnect between the field and the executive team on where the company was going. I knew that my first 90 days was shoring up that and then creating a process with the executive team and the entire company to get everybody aligned so that we could then say, okay, this is what Princess House is going to go be in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and you took the company through a really interesting process in developing that go forward strategy. I love a good framework. I think it helps to make any process go a lot smoother. And you mentioned some really important things that I'm going to swing back to here in a couple of minutes around kind of in alignment and process, but could you talk to us a little bit about this framework, the strategic framework that you used in developing your go-forward strategy? And I think you call it vision journey. And can you just shine a little bit of light on that for us?
Absolutely. I've done this before and I've seen the effects of it. It's a really wonderful framework. What it does is it takes everybody basically through a journey. So you start off with what's the history of the company. And by that, I mean, what are the things that have happened in a long, rich history like Princess House that have turned the trajectory of the business, whether it is for good or bad, actually. And it was a great process for me to go through that with my team because I was new. So it was an opportunity for us to really talk about how, Princess House used to be a crystal company with little crystal figurines, and now we're a kitchenware company. And so what happened in those journeys that actually changed the trajectory? And then you go through, what are we good at? What are our core competencies here? Because you don't want to lose sight of what those are, because that's your foundation, right? So let's agree with what we're really good at and then how we can build on it. And then we go through a process where we talk about what are the critical issues in the company. And so, for instance, we talked about the fact that we really have lost trust with the field. That was a critical issue that we knew we had to solve for, and we would list those out. And then even more importantly was we took a look at what's happening in the environment around us. Interesting, I started in January of 2020, and here we are in March and April working on this project to create this journey vision, and we're all locked up in our homes. So, what was that going to do to our business? What was the effect of that? What was happening in the environment around us? We really took a look at that. And then the next part of that process was really to take a look at what is our mission and what is our vision. And if you match up what your critical issues are against what you're good at, you then take a look at your organization and say, do we have the means or within the organization to solve those critical issues? And then as a team, we developed what is our mission and then what is our vision? I asked the team, I said, if someone comes up to you in 2 years from now or 3 years from now and says, what is Princess House? You want to answer that question with, Princess House is a company that ... And so we went through that process, and ultimately we all ended up using a lot of the same words. And from those words that we all used, we were able to pull together a vision statement. And then the next part of that process is really taking a look at that vision statement and saying, what are the strategies that we need to do to actually achieve that vision? And once we got that, everyone was in alignment that, okay, this is where we're going to spend our time and our energy and our money to then be that kind of a company in 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love a framework because I think, again, especially that one, it's so simple yet so powerful. And by simple, I don't mean easy. I mean, this was really hard foundational work. But breaking it down kind of into these, key phases, these component parts allow you to kind of tackle it. And that's where I'd love to kind of jump back. And now that we have kind of the overview of what that framework and that journey looks like, to dig into kind of each of these phases. And, I've kind of organized them. It might be a little bit differently than you might call them. But I think just looking at it linearly, going through kind of a discovery and then development and then deployment of that strategy. So one of the things that you said that I think is really, really important is that you took the time to understand the environment that you're going to be operating and competing in. And I think this kind of discovery and really this deep dive is one of the aspects of strategy that gets missed the most. I think we want to get to that end result, that future state so quickly that oftentimes we try to, cut corners a little bit or kind of jump into the planning process. However, without these right inputs, we're never going to end up with the right outputs. And I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about, as I know a little bit about how you did this, you brought in a really large group. So again, I think there can be a tendency to move quickly, especially for a new president and CEO, or, analogous to that is, a new vice president or director in an organization, but you want to move quick. And oftentimes lots of opinions can potentially, slow down the planning process where, you're trying to bring all of those people to the table, all of those voices in. But this worked out so well for you. And I was so impressed that you had every function represented. It wasn't this kind of carve out team, but it was really ensuring that you had every function represented. Can you talk about kind of the importance or the power that came from including such a large group in the planning process?
Yeah, there were about 14 people, including myself, that was part of this process. And one of the critical issues that I knew from my consulting point was there just wasn't alignment. Departments were acting in silos. And, as is typically in any company, when you're trying to figure it out, oftentimes you're trying a lot of different things. And so really the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. So I knew that this process was really important to be inclusive, especially being a brand new CEO. And the team had gone through, a pretty rough 3 years. So we included the head of human resources, the head of our distribution center, our customer service, director, every functional department, so that ultimately we would all get to this strategy together. And then deploying that through the ranks was really, frankly, their own departments. So if they're believers, because they helped to create it, they're going to create that belief through the organization and that consistency.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as they were, I'm sure, updating their organizations throughout the process, the communication that inevitably leads to really great or better communication, throughout the organization than just having, again, this kind of carve out identified group. So I think there's a lot of power in being inclusive like you were.
It was really powerful. And I think everyone walked out of the room with just an energy level that hadn't been there in a really long time. And the beauty of a document like this is then that became our structure to go to our board and to present to our board of directors, so that, I like to use the analysis of getting all your arrows in the right direction, because you can't create momentum if everybody's doing this, and that includes your board. And so we had the opportunity as a team to present this to them and say, okay, here's our structure. Here's our priorities. This is what we're going to do first, second, and third, because you really can't do all of these strategies at the same time. And it just has made for just perfect alignment with not just, within our own, executive team, but within the board. And then ultimately we presented it to the leaders in the field.
I think that speaks a lot to your leadership style, which, again, I know we're going to hear more about as we discuss today. But I love that you said we presented this to the board. Again, I think you could have taken that as a new CEO, taken the plan and said, hey, this is my new plan. This is what I'm going to roll out. But I think, again, what you said speaks a lot to how you operate and your leadership style. And I commend you for that. But
Thank you.
Having it be a team presentation and going to the board, and I know we're going to get into trust here in a little bit, but I'm sure it created a lot of the trust within your organization, and then shared ownership and responsibility for the outcome.
I think that was critical, that it is shared ownership. We all owned this plan. We all created this plan together. Typically I actually don't do much talking in board meetings. I let my team speak for their own areas that they're responsible for. And I think that is a really good process for the board to really know who's driving the business every day.
Absolutely. Again, I think that's really powerful. Another thing I know you did as part of the discovery in looking at the environment and getting all the inputs in and understanding the context of how you're going to operate, you're looking at competition, you're looking at channel dynamics, category dynamics, but you also spent a lot of time with the field. And I know you mentioned that there was kind of a disconnect from a communication standpoint and maybe even a trust standpoint with the field. But you said that you went out and really met them where they were. And this is another, I think, gesture and approach that is really powerful. And again, speaks to your approach. It's easier to just fly in a group of our consultants, our field leaders, and spend an afternoon with them and get all the inputs and then, kind of send them back on their way. But going out and meeting them where they're at and sitting through, how they learning about them and their environments and their homes, how they display the products, how they use the products, how they share the products. I think it's so much richer from like an ethnography standpoint and understanding more context around them. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what you learned really going out into the field?
Well, a little bit of a course correction on that. My first meeting was out in January out in Los Angeles at a leader meeting. It was, I think, my third week on the job. And it was obviously before the pandemic happened. And what I really told these leaders, because it was interesting as I was listening to them, the arrows were not aligned in any way, shape, or form. And so really what I stood up to them and said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to be in constant and consistent communication with you, and we're going to bring you in as our strategic partners. And we're going to develop a plan that's going to say to you, like, this is the future of Princess House, and this is how we're going to get there. But we're going to make you partners at the table. And so we ended up developing these councils. So we developed 9 different councils that we pulled field members into that meet on a regular basis. So for instance, if we're having a conversation about an incentive, well, we will go to the incentive council and say, here are our ideas. What do you think about them? Now, we don't let the field does not make those decisions. They're actually our partners in helping us to think through and coming up with a decision together. And that's been very, very effective. And quarterly, all of the work of the councils comes up to a CEO council that we then share with the top leaders at the CEO council what the work has been done and the decisions that have been done. So through that process, as well as constant weekly webinar communications throughout the pandemic, we created a sense of trust and transparency with our field. And I truly believe that the chaos from this pandemic allowed us to really communicate with them, because they were looking for assistance and they were looking for help, and their aperture for trying new and different things because they had to really helped develop that trust with each other. Because certainly, like every other company, we've had our challenges through the pandemic. I mean, supply chain issues,
Sure,
you name it. But when we talk to them and educate them every single week and say, this is what's going on, they become part of the problem and the solution, which has really worked in our favor.
yeah, I know that strategy ended up helping to become kind of an anchor and a guide in the, the chaos and the challenges that were to come in, just literally weeks after you began this process. I want to circle back to something that you just mentioned. You talked about, we want the distributor's input, we want their voice in the room, but ultimately, that you and the company need to make the decision. And I know you said that that's a really fine line between, letting the field drive the company and the company drive the field. Can you talk a little bit about what that relationship ultimately looks like? Again, you may need to make decisions that aren't as popular or maybe aren't as obvious in the short term, knowing that this is going to be best for your consultants, for your customers, and for the company in the long term. How do you walk that line?
I think it's through education. Our consultants are very good business people, especially our leaders. They've been with this company for a really long time. And when you explain to them, like, I like your idea, but this is why we're not going to do it, they're like, okay, great. They understand. And I think they understand that because they have seen, just again, this partnership, this transparency, and they have full faith that we're making the right decisions, even when it is hard. Recently we did raise prices. We haven't raised prices in 8 years. And we explained to them why. And they were like, okay, we got it. We understand. And whereas I think if that had been done, 2-3 years ago, without any explanation, it would have been a completely different experience.
Yeah, it could have been disastrous, absolutely, without that communication.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I found fascinating about Princess House as I learned more and more, again, it's been this company that I've admired. I've seen how long it's been in business, at least, had an eye on it for 20 years or so. But you have a really, really unique consultant base. And what I mean by that is that about 90% of the field is Hispanic, which is, rare from a percentage standpoint. We know that it's a vibrant and powerful market within the direct selling channel, and lots of companies, any segmentation. I think direct selling, we're not amazing at it, but yet you've got this amazing field that so many people are trying to connect with and trying to go after. Can you talk about how that influenced, the demographic makeup of your core consultant? How did that impact or inform your go forward strategy?
Well, you're right. They are very loyal, hardworking people. And one of our strategy was like, we don't want to lose that. And I think there was a belief internally that they had maxed out with the Hispanic market, and that they needed to grow other markets to actually take Princess House to that next level of growth. And so first was stabilizing that. That was job one, stabilize the Hispanic community, really authentically create meaningful relationships. Because one thing that I really understand about this community is they value authentic relationships. And when they don't think you're being authentic, then there is a significant breakdown. And that was what the company was based on. So we need to stabilize that. And we also believed very strongly that we had not, by the time we went through this strategic process, that we had not maximized. There was more growth to be had within this community. So let's pour ourselves into that and help them figure out how they can continue to grow their business. And through the pandemic, it actually opened up really amazing opportunities for our community, because with the party plan business, there was a very tried and true way that they sold this product. They would load their pots and pans up into the back of their car, and they would go to someone's house and they would do a cooking demonstration. And so the geography barriers were very limiting for them. So we had huge penetration in certain markets like California and Texas, and there was not that belief that they could do business outside of their geographical area. And then when the pandemic hit and they couldn't get in their cars and go to other people's homes, they actually opened themselves up to this idea that technology can be part of their equation. And they were willing to try new things. I mean, we have testimonials from women that say, oh my God, when the camera was on, I was terrified, but I just decided to do it. And then all the orders started coming through. So they have completely shifted the way that they do business. And subsequently, that's really how we grew so fast during the pandemic in the last 2 years, is because we have women that are creating sales across the country, and they are creating team members that are not necessarily in their geographical location as well.
I think that is so important. You mentioned that internally there was a belief that maybe you had kind of penetrated about as deep as you can into this segment or into this market. However, that wasn't what you believed, and you knew that there was still potential, great potential there. I think it's such a powerful lesson not to kind of run to the next geographic market or run to the next customer segment and feel that that is the answer for growth. But oftentimes it is just like digging deep. And as you mentioned, establishing these deeper and more meaningful relationships with those customers, that there's so much potential in the audience, in the group, and the customers, the consultants that you are speaking to now. So to really shore up and kind of maximize that first before moving on, because what often happens is we never come back to fix or to optimize or to shore up that group. And ultimately, I've seen it so many times just in companies that I've been at that, that market never comes back. Those customer segments never come back because we've moved on and haven't given them support. I think that is so, so powerful. And I love that idea of meaningful relationships, not just communicating with them, with your consultants and customers, but really establishing relationships. Because I do think that's one of the superpowers we have as a channel.
Yeah, and our strategies, when we developed, what are the strategies to achieve our vision? A very important one was connection and culture. It was, it's on the paper for a reason. And then we obviously developed tactics underneath on how to do that.
I love that. So shifting into kind of this next phase, so from the discovery phase of bringing in all the inputs into developing the strategy itself, bringing that group of execs that you mentioned that are representative of your entire organization. You've also talked about the importance of field-centered strategy. Can you tell me what that looks like and how that might differ from, other approaches to strategy?
Yeah, I think that once we were able to present this to our leaders in the field, they helped to develop how they were going to achieve that same vision with us. And so through these councils, we really were able to bring these different strategies to them and work through how we were going to make that happen in the field. We also redesigned our sales team. So we had regional sales managers that were responsible for their own regions. And that was not the way that it was set up before. And I feel like that is so critical, because you can't create these meaningful connections if people don't know who's their person to go to. So these regional managers really know their regions inside and out. They work with their leaders every single day to take the plans that we have, that we develop corporately, and make them happen out in the field. So there's a chain of communication that we started right from the beginning when I came here, was weekly webinars with the leaders, the top leaders. And then later on in that week, so that happens on Mondays, and then later on that week, the regional sales managers actually take that same exact message and they hold the same meetings, but all the way down to the lowest level of leadership. And they're very, very well attended. And then I think the other thing that we really felt was important was, and it was one of our strategies, was leadership development. These women are craving to be poured into for their own personal development. And I think we all know in direct selling that if your field is happy, they're going to be motivated to do well. Well, happiness is also a part of managing through stress, managing through daily, chaoses with their teams and any of those types of things. So we have poured into our leaders multiple leadership development programs that they walk out of it feeling like they are better equipped to manage their teams. They feel like they will actually use the word, we are happy. And they have learned a lot through these webinars. And so that is just as important as giving them a promotion or as an incentive, is creating meaningful connections by actually pouring into them. They feel valued.
I love that. I think, leadership development and personal development is foundational, I think, to really developing and strengthening a field. And it's part of what I think retains them when they see themselves developing and evolving as a business person, as a human. They're going to want more of that. They're going to want to continue to be on their growth journey. So I do think that is a foundational pillar that we have to have, and that should be a big part of it. Another really interesting thing you said, you talked about the sales team, and I thought it was really interesting that they were cascading the same message all the way down throughout the organization, getting back to that alignment that you'd been working so hard to establish. I think it would have been easy for each sales manager or each region to have their own message, and we're focused on this, but having that really consistent message so that everybody's kind of marching to the same beat is really powerful. I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah, it's really served us well. It's served us well, and I think that when people all know what's the objective and what the outcome that we're looking for, then they all get behind it. And we all know about momentum, right? Once you've got the momentum, if you can keep that momentum, it's like the flywheel, right? It's hard to get it going again if you stop. Mm-hmm. So by having these weekly touch bases and having these weekly conversations on what our goals are, what our plans are, and cascading it through the organization, it keeps our momentum going. And I believe that was a big part of our success.
Yeah, that is really powerful. So you mentioned a little while ago the exercise as part of the development process of the strategy of going through and creating that vision statement. And there's a couple of really interesting things I think about your approach and the results that came out of that. So one, I think you gave everybody kind of the opportunity or the exercise to go through and finish that ... In 3 years, Princess House will be blank. And I think you were surprised, and I was as well when I heard about this, that there was so much consistency. And one of the things that almost everybody had, it was almost unanimous, was the word trust that was included in that vision. So what kind of light bulb went off when you saw that it was something that everybody wanted and needed so much within the organization? How did that help inform kind of where you landed?
Yeah, and again, that word trust came from what are our critical issues, right? There was lack of trust. There was lack of trust amongst our leadership executive team in the home office with each other, that they were all going to be delivering what they were supposed to be delivering. There was lack of trust with the field and the home office, and even within some leaders in the field. And so again, these words, I'm not surprised because this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've done this exercise, and it always happens exactly the same way where people come up with the same words because the words come from solving your critical issues. And so, it's an important part. We came up with, everybody used the word innovative. We need to be an innovative company. We need to be a trusted company. We need to create social connection. And there were very much of those all came from the critical issues that we knew if we could solve them, then that is really the kind of company we want to be.
Absolutely. And I just want to circle back and make sure that I kind of articulate those 3 kind of primary critical issues that came out of the discovery process. Was really aligning around a common vision, that there was an amazing foundation there, but it was missing process. And so that's where kind of these silos were operating independently. And then finally, the communication and connection with the field and the consultants that I know you mentioned. So you identified these. Look, these are the 3 things that we have to end up solving as part of this strategic development process. So the other thing that was really interesting to me about your process and about the vision that you developed was that you extended out to a 3-year horizon. again, I think we used to, even just a few years ago, extend it out to 5 years, or this is our vision. But you kept it really close in. What was the intent and the objective behind having a vision that you knew that you would be there to see, or, potentially, hopefully not, but not see, if you weren't able to achieve these objectives?
Well, I think it was interesting because our first conversations was this is a 3 to 5 year. I think that's what we all thought it was going to be, because there was some significant heavy lifting that had to be done in there. One of our strategies was technology advancements. There was a lot of old technology here in Princess House, and we knew that was going to take some time to really speed up and get to the level where it needed to be. Once the pandemic hit, and we realized that actually getting the field to adopt some of these new technologies was actually going to be a lot easier because they had to. We all realized this is more like a 3-year process. And interestingly enough, I was just at the last board meeting and reading over our vision statement, it came to realize that we are that kind of a company already. So in 2 years, we achieved our vision. And when we went through each of the strategies that got us there, we were like checking the box. Yep, we did this. Yep, we did this. Yes, we did this. Yes, we did that. So the belief that those strategies were the right things, even amongst the day-to-day chaos and the pandemic, to stay focused on them and not lose sight of them, helped us to achieve our vision. And the organization, we just did another journey vision for the next 2 years. And we all got back together and spent an entire day and whiteboarded it and said, your vision always has to feel aspirational. And so while we didn't necessarily change our vision, we changed certain words to it. So for instance, we had in our original vision that it was social connection was part of it. Well, we changed that to meaningful relationships, because as we've all realized, having a healthy mental state through everything that this entire country and the world has gone through over the last 2 years, that it's more important that we continue to develop into them to take stresses off of them and to develop into their personal development. And so just that shift made it feel aspirational again. And so it was a great process. I think everyone walked out of it again feeling like we know where we're going and this feels really good.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I think that's incredible that you were able to even beat the 3-year horizon on the vision, and to take that step back and say, wow, we went through the process, we did the hard work, we made the investments, we made the adjustments, and we were able to achieve our vision even sooner than we thought. And as you mentioned, going into that gives you the opportunity to then develop it for the next 3 years, to extend out again. And it has to make going into that room and into that process so much more exciting, so much more believable, having that level of trust and excitement for that group to look around at each other and say, look, we did it. We were able to achieve this. Now let's go do it again. I think that's amazing. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and during that process and in that room. It had to be pretty incredible.
It was great. But even, we even took it a step further. We actually did a journey vision with our product team, because the product team, as companies evolve, we're now in the electrics. This was a new category for us. This now became one of our core competencies, that we are doing amazing business with electrics, our high-powered electric blender and, our stand mixers and things like that, which was new to the company. So even your product team needs a 3-year vision. Where are we going? And one of the things that when we looked back at the history of the company, we realized that we used to be in the living room with crystal figurines and things like that and home decor, and we've put ourselves only in the kitchen. And so with this 3-year journey that we went on, we said, we don't have to be just in the kitchen. So let's develop categories of product that we think could be right for Princess House that we can expand into. But if we hadn't gone through that process, that wouldn't have actually given us that permission to say, oh yeah, we can play in this arena too. So it doesn't just have to be at a corporate level. You can take that down into your IT team can go through a journey vision because they need a roadmap that is aligned with the corporate vision. So we're about to kick off an IT journey vision now that we have the corporate one and we know where the product is going, so we can align everybody into the same time frame. So it's a very powerful tool, and you end up literally with one piece of paper. And the beauty of the one piece of paper is that everybody has it on their desk. everybody knows this is where we're going, and it's not a 50-page document that collects dust on the shelf.
Man, that's amazing. There's so many things I want to circle back on right there. One is getting everything down at the high level, the umbrella level, to one piece of paper. I have been at companies where it is, your annual plan ends up being a phone book, and it sits on the desk and it's cumbersome and it's convoluted, and no one ever references it after you complete the planning process. But having something, this key takeaway, this touch point that you can look at, having it down so simply, I think makes it powerful. I think it creates the alignment, and it also probably makes it feel more achievable. When it's 50, 60, 70 pages long and it's not really aligned around the organization, I think even subconsciously, we can almost want to ignore the plan because it's so complex that we don't even want to kind of dig in it or look at it again. And so getting it down to one piece of paper, and again, of course, that there's plans. Every function is going to have a plan of how they support and ladder up to that one page.
There's
to what's on
tactics
there.
underneath every one of them.
Absolutely.
It's a living, breathing document. And I think that's important for people to understand, is it's not just okay, here it is. There are tactics under each one of these strategies that get looked at every single week. And,
absolutely.
In many cases, as the world changes, you might take something off and say, you know what, this was like a priority 3, it needs to be a priority 1. Or this is now not relevant, let's just take it off and we need to add something to it. So we treat it internally like a living, breathing document.
Absolutely. And as it relates to alignment and prioritization, when you have your critical issues and your key initiatives all right there, the vision, the mission, it serves as a filter for decision making. So you can really quickly, if you're working on a project or asked to work on a project or initiative, you can say, well, how does it help these objectives here? How does it help reach our mission, our vision, our financial goals? And so I think it serves a really powerful purpose throughout the organization, and having it as distilled and simple as possible, I think makes it the most impactful. You also talked about the importance of product innovation. And I know that this was one of the key initiatives and objectives that came out of the planning process. And you mentioned again, and this circles back earlier to where you talked about what are we good at? And I think that's a question that doesn't often get asked from a product standpoint. In the R&D or the product development process, it can be, hey, and on the product management side, what is a product that is really hot right now? What's a product or a category that's growing? Should we go chase that? Instead of looking and saying, well, what are we really good at? What helps position the brand? What helps reinforce our vision, who we are, what we stand for? And I think it can send us off into these paths that most time aren't really very fruitful. Like you talked about having the permission to go there. We have to give ourselves the permission internally, but I think our consultants and our consumers have to give us permission as well as we're looking at products. Can our brand extend into that category? Yeah. Can our brand stretch there? And I love that you looked at it as, you broke down kind of the home. We used to be in this room. Now we're primarily in this room. And that was a really big piece of the strategy in 2020 when all the chaos started and lockdown happened, that you really took a step back and looked at the product. And it may not have been, because of supply chain and because of timelines, you can't just, we can't snap our fingers and have new products there, but we can change how we position and message them. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that shift in positioning and messaging around your products in 2020.
Yeah, the company had started towards a path of developing products that make your life healthier and more beautiful. And that is actually our mission statement. At the time, that was what we developed when we did this. And we said, this is actually very appropriate, because during the pandemic, everybody really was focusing on health. I mean, as sickness was around us, we wanted to really elevate the fact that we create products that make you healthier. You cook with less oils. We actually teach and train around how you can cook healthier, how you can balance your food groups out. And, our community was really highly affected by the pandemic. And they were really looking to us to say, how can we deliver on this mission? Why do we exist? We are here to give you healthier products that make your home feel more beautiful. And so that was really an angle that we could focus on. And even as we stand here now, we tweaked that in our next version, and we said we stand for making you happier and healthier and more beautiful products. And just that tweak is so important because there's so much you can do to create happiness, not just for our field, but for our customers, things that make them happy. And so it's been an interesting product. I think we were in the right place at the right time with the pandemic. For everyone had to cook in their homes. And so how did we take advantage of that and really try to educate on how to live healthier?
Yeah, I think that's an incredible shift and pivot that you were able to accomplish really quickly that, as you mentioned, makes it even more relevant in the lives of consultants and consumers. So now shifting into deploying the strategy. So we've completed the discovery, the development of the strategy, and deploying and rolling it out. I know that you were very purposeful in rolling it out internally first to the employees and then to the distributors and then earlier consultants and then kind of more externally. Can you talk about why you chose to really focus and kind of market and roll it out internally first?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, again, one of our main critical issues is coming in was that the employees were in a state of stress. They did not know what the direction of the company was. And while we got the 14 of us in the room in alignment, we really wanted the employees to feel like, here is our strategy, here's our objectives, here's how we're going to get there. And then actually everyone's SMART objectives came off of those. So, we have SMART objectives here where employees are rated on them. And so everything came right down to their individual objectives came off of that. And it was really important to get I'm a new CEO, right? I've never been in kitchenware. I've been in women's fashion my entire life. And so I had a lot to learn, but they had to learn how to trust me too. You don't walk into a job by your title and get trust. It doesn't work that way. You have to earn it, and you have to do it by being a partner with your constituents first. And so once we did that, it was then easy. We took it to the leaders and presented it to them, literally presented all parts of it. What are we good at? What is our history? And so they understood what that document was, and we continuously update them. So in our conference in July, we will then be showing them the new journey vision that we worked on. And in our product councils, because we do have a council for product, we're going to show them the product journey vision and get their feedback saying, yes, we can step into this category. That is something that, we know we can sell, and that is something that we know our consumers would be looking for. So it's just a continual process to deploy this.
Yeah, I love that it served the purpose to kind of help, as you've mentioned, create that alignment internally. It allows the employees to really understand and know the promises and the objectives that they need to deliver on. So there's, no question what their responsibilities are. And I can just imagine going into, prior to your conference, this next round of doing the journey and including the field, where your team, again, even though, there's always a time for celebration and then a time to look forward, you get to take a little bit of a victory lap and say, look, what we did with the field's input, with the employees' input, we were really able to achieve this vision. Now let's go do it again. I think the trust and excitement that is going to be part of that experience that's going to come from your field leaders is going to be amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about the results now. So these are pretty amazing numbers. I know you've shared them before, generally kind of, high level percentages. Do you mind talking a little bit about the results that you found?
Sure. Since from the beginning of 2020 to the end of 2021, our gross sales grew by 110%.
Wow.
And our operating profit grew by 240%. So we've definitely achieved our objectives. Honestly, our budget was nowhere near that. So it's been quite a ride over the last 2 years. And when you have that kind of meteoric growth, there's two things you have to worry about. One is executing on that, because there's a slew of challenges that come along with that. But number two is making sure that it is solid growth, that it is foundational, solid growth, and it's not just a flash in the pan. And so we spend a lot of time really talking about like what got us that growth and make sure that we are stabilizing. It just seems like it's just a constant flow of changing environments. So let's make sure that what we're doing is for long-term growth and not just for short-term growth.
No, absolutely. And I think one, not only does it create that new baseline, which absolutely we all want to keep and maintain. I think one of the numbers that you mentioned that is most interesting, and I think speaks most almost to the process you went through, is the profitability. Because so many times as we were launching new initiatives, it's new budgets. We're going to be putting, lots of dollars into new initiatives and new departments. But you were able to do it at record, not just record level revenue, but record level profitability. And I think that gets back to the process and the strategy that you helped to create around that alignment. So that people weren't just spending, it created the focus of what's important and that prioritization. So congrats, not only on the revenue number, but the profitability as well. That's really incredible.
Thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. We were spending money when we knew it was going to give us a return on our investment, because it was, again, aligned with the strategy. So we weren't just doing squirrel on different projects that maybe would hit and wasting money that way. No, it was very intended, targeted, where our money and our focus was going to be positioned.
I love that. So I'm going to shift into kind of the final few questions. I'd love to know some of the leadership learnings that you've been able to glean and take away from this process and for your time at Prince's House. So you've been there about 2 years now. What do you feel, maybe a little bit more than 2 years now, but what do you feel have been the most important learnings, kind of both professionally and personally?
When I was first introduced to direct selling through Cabby, Cabby also has a very strong culture of deep, meaningful relationships and connections. And while I was the CEO there for 6 years, a little over 6 years, I didn't see, it had always been kind of part of that culture. And so when I came here and I really realized that this was missing and that we needed to work on this, I didn't totally realize how powerful it actually can be. I knew it because it was, I did experience that at Cabby, but not having it here and then developing that, I think for me professionally was something very much an eye-opening experience, because I will be honest with you, working with, brick and mortar retailers, there really is no meaningful connection there. It's the conversation on markdowns and, things like that. It's not that kind of a relationship. And so that is very unique to the direct selling business. And, I think anyone who's listening to this knows that. But when you actually experience the shift in what can happen with that, that's a whole different level of learning that has been really important to me in my personal development.
So coming out of the last 2 years, beginning in 2020, we are all still trying to figure out this new normal around work, around personal and professional balance. And your company has made some pretty amazing strides. And I know that you're shifting to kind of a hybrid work model, but from a headquarters perspective, you've done something really interesting that I've only seen maybe once or twice. And it's amazing. I'd love for you to describe your approach a little bit to your HQ.
Sure. The company was based in a 45,000 square foot, very, very traditional office, cubes. There wasn't a lot of character to it. There wasn't a lot of aspirational branding aspect to it. They've been in the building for a long period of time. And when we all had to go home and work from our houses, that was pretty disruption for our employees, who many of our employees have been here over 30 years. This company is very much acts like a family. And so people start working in Prince's House and really just don't leave. We have such longevity here, which is amazing. And so at first it was uncomfortable, but we really put in steps in place, like every other company, that how are we going to keep that connection and that culture? So the use of Teams and things like that obviously was how we all pivoted. At that time, I didn't really know anyone in the company. I started, as I said, in January. Interestingly, I broke my foot the second week on the job. And so I was on crutches, so I wasn't, walking around the building as much as I normally would do. And then next thing you know, we're all working from our homes. And I actually live in North Carolina, and the company is based in Massachusetts. So we weren't even we could even get in our cars to go talk to each other.
Right.
And at the time, by August, our lease was up in that building in August. And we started to have a conversation. We realized how effective that we were working from home and how we had built the system so that we could keep that connection and culture up with different various meetings that, like, I literally had a meeting every single week with every single employee. I would get on a 10-minute call with each individual department and just say, how are you? How is your day? Tell me about your family, because I didn't have that opportunity to do that. And so with our lease being up in August, we as the executive team kind of had a conversation and said, you know what? I think we can do this differently. I think that we can be a different kind of a company, that we could actually build a space that was completely collaborative. So we designed and built a brand new space. It's 14,000 square feet, so completely much, much smaller. But everything is set up to be collaborative. And people come here when they need to have a team meeting, or when I come, for 1 week out of the entire month, and my executive team comes in and we work together. So we're face to face. But it's been great. I think it's given people a lot of flexibility. It's also given us as a company, we've had numerous people retire over the last year and a half, and we have more that will ultimately be coming. And so we've opened up to the fact that we can get talent from anywhere. You don't have to be outside of Boston, Massachusetts. We can hire the best of the talent, and they can be anywhere in the country. And I think that's really made us quite progressive. And nobody owns their office here. I don't own my office here. Anybody can use it when I'm not here. And we basically, people reserve a space and they come in for the day.
That is so cool. That truly is collaborative, where there aren't assigned seats, where anyone can come in and sit and work wherever they'd like. And I love that you're open to not having these geographic limitations from a talent attraction and retention standpoint, but really you now have the ability to go bring in the best talent from anywhere around the country and around the world. And I think that is going to be an important factor going forward for all our companies.
I also think it is given our employees a sense of satisfaction. I mean, not everybody is thrilled about living in the Northeast in the snow and in the ice. And so I gave permission to people to move. We had employees that moved to Florida, that moved to Tennessee, that moved to the Carolinas, that have moved to California. They have that freedom. And I think that keeping your employees happy is also a really important part of keeping the culture and the connection in the company.
Absolutely. That is so important, so powerful. So, okay. So last question. So you've spent the last, few years as part of your planning process, this last round and the one you're going through now, really kind of looking down the road as you've been digging in at what's happening in the channel and at what's going on at Prince's House. What do you see for direct selling down the road that excites you the most?
Yeah, I like to call it the both and approach, because this was a business model that was only in-person selling. As I mentioned, you would go to somebody's house, or you would go to some event and you would do a cooking demonstration and sell your products. That has shifted to digital selling, social selling, Facebook Live type of presentations. And I'm so excited as we are coming, hopefully good, out of this pandemic, or just living with it at that point, that we can have this both and how powerful would that be, that they can keep up their digital shows, but they can also do in person. And I'm really encouraging our leaders to think about how that looks. What does that look like? Because I don't think we're ever going to go back to the old way. I think that that's just gone. But layering in the personal connection and layering in, in-person meetings again, and some in-person demonstrations, I think is going to take us to that next level. So I'm really excited for the future of this, because I think it's, look what we did with just digital. Now, if we can do both and, I think we've got another long runway of growth here.
So both and that is a perfect spot for us to end on. And I do think that the future is so bright for all of us in direct selling because of what you just said, being able to achieve the scale and the reach that we haven't had with the personal human connection that has always been at the foundation of this channel. Lynne, congrats on all of the success that you and everybody at Prince's House has achieved. Thank you for sharing these incredible insights and for this framework. I know I'm putting this framework into use here for our next planning session. I would just say we're so glad that you're in the direct selling channel and that you're helping to elevate Princess House and direct selling for all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to register for the upcoming DSU hybrid event and the DSN Global Celebration at dsu2022.com. Thank you for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.